The Case for Veganism, written by Donald Watson in the 1946 spring edition of The Vegan. The appearance of The Vegan as a printed magazine is a suitable occasion to restate the vegan case. In earlier issues, evidence was given to suggest that the whole question of man's relationship with animals is ripe for review, both in the interests of animals and of ourselves, and it is to work for the breaking down of our traditional dependence on animals for food, clothing and other purposes that the vegan society exists. We challenge customs which other humanitarian organisations do not question, and we give warning of the dangers arising from the use of animal food. Veganism should be judged by a test no less severe than is suggested by Huxley in his definition of science. Science, he says, is simple common sense at its best, that is, rightly accurate to observation and merciless to fallacy. Before you can be safe in dealing with nature, you must get two or more kinds of cross-proofs so as they make sure that your hypotheses fit each set of facts and that they are not contradicted by some other set of facts which appears just as clear and certain. If Huxley refers to cross-proofs relating merely to physical evidence, we ask that consideration of the vegan case be made even more stern by insisting that in human problems the spiritual side of man's nature must also be accommodated, that the development of conscience can hardly be considered an evolutionary accident, and that this factor demands recognition. This is not to become unscientifically sentimental, but to guard against the danger of becoming unethically scientific. It is not easy for people to see wrong or danger in long-established custom. Throughout history, appalling crimes have been committed by people in the firm belief that they were doing nothing wrong, and communities have been decimated through suicidal habits which for centuries no one questioned. It must be so today, otherwise human life would be healthier and better established. The medical men are clearly not saving us from the ever-encroaching ravages of chronic disease, nor are the politicians and parsons delivering us from social strife. Well might Mr. Oldham, writing in a recent Christian newsletter, ask, among the 1,000 questions which perplex and battle us, is there some more crucial issue which, if rightly understood and rightly dealt with, would mark the turning point in our society from sickness to health? In the confusing complexity of life today, is there one deciding point at which a change, if it were to come about, would be so fundamental as to mark off one period of history from another? Veganism has something to offer in answer to this question. Briefly, the case is as follows. The new relationship. The acceptance of a reformed relationship between man and animals is imperative. The higher animals have feelings like ours, therefore they should have justice on equal terms with ourselves, or not to be bred into the world. Until this demand is met, man will remain a thug species despite his pious creeds. Animals present us with a test case, and by our conduct to them in their innocence and weakness, our own standards are truly fixed. Admit that the strong have the right to exploit the weak, and the basis of civilized society is gone. The attitude is one of conceit and selfishness, and unless discarded, will not confine itself to the treatment of animals. Therefore, in man's interest, animal exploitation must end. Not only flesh food, but all products of the slaughterhouse must be denounced and the most serious effort made to avoid their use. Human existence does not depend upon the inconceivable tyranny now existing against animals. In fact, progress is impeded enormously by it. To renounce this tragic heritage is to be born again, to a life sometimes more difficult, but always of clearer conscience and more satisfying conclusion. All animal foods must go. The acceptance of such new obligations makes its impact felt most keenly in diet. A century of effort on the part of the vegetarian societies has left no doubt that if man eats flesh, he does so because he chooses, not because he needs. But what of other animal foods? Modern farmers, dairymen, poultry keepers and beekeepers are all geared to a pitch of business efficiency hitherto unknown and which is registered by bigger output, reduced quality and utter indifference to the feelings of the creatures involved. To attain the new relationship, there is no alternative than to abstain from all animal foods and rebuild a new diet to meet human requirements. In the light of recent experience and observation, it seems strange that for 90 years vegetarian literature contained nothing to question either morally or psychologically the use of animal foods other than flesh. Milk, cheese and eggs were acknowledged substitutes, and honey was a food of the gods. Until quite recently, so fully did we consider ourselves justified in using these foods that when an investigation was carried out at a vegetarian summer holiday centre, it was found that the visitors were consuming much more of them than was the case with the average meat eater. Even Henry Salt, on page 36 of The Logic of Vegetarianism, sought to protect the inconsistency of the vegetarian on the ground that it is ridiculous to compare the killing of a newly born calf with the killing of a fully adult animal. Why ridiculous? Is young life less sentient than old? If there is to be killing, would it not be preferable to kill an old stock, so let each new life mature and experience something other than a cutthroat? And do not the feelings of the cow at this time deserve consideration? The meat and dairy industries today are more than ever hand in glove, each subsidising the other. The establishment of a big dairy industry. The establishment of a big dairy industry without a supporting meat industry would be difficult, if not impossible, economically, and until more is known of the factors governing the determination of sex, the slaughter of superfluous bull calves would be inevitable. Veal calves come almost entirely from dairy herds, and are therefore a byproduct of the milk industry. A plea for the cow. The modern cow suffers harshly at the hand of man, her parasite. Her calf is taken from her at birth, and frequently she will cry for it for days. Her life is a succession of pregnancies, forced upon her whether she wishes them or not, with the briefest possible periods in between for physical regeneration. She is kept cramped in dark stalls in winter and fed on artificial food containing bone, flour, blood meal, fish meal and cod liver oil. She, a vegan, she is often milked by machinery. Her midwife may be a farm labourer. She is branded with hot irons, artificially inseminated, dosed, inoculated and tuberculin tested until before the age of 4 she is worn out. Her natural age would be about 30. She is finally killed and eaten because she is one of the 5,000 a year who contract foot and mouth disease, in which case she is destroyed. It is not her fault that she kills through her infected milk 2,000 children in this country each year by tuberculosis, and that she cripples thousands more. Pooling milk means that all is infected. The state of dairy herds. More than half the cows in this country have TB. 40% have mastitis. In the quiescent stage of this disease, the cow may be secreting several 100,000 streptococci in every few drops of her milk. 58% of cows passing out of our herds have to be disposed of owing to disease. In summer, cows frequently dung in their stagnant drinking water. Between 1913 and 1937, there were 113 reported outbreaks of milk-borne disease in this country. The distribution of this sex product to millions of homes and to schools daily calls for a complex organisation, and when all is finished, the delivered article is nearly all water. Bacterial soup. Lord Teviot remarked recently in the House of Lords that milk was a most dangerous food. The best solution the dairy scientists can offer is to turn living organisms into dead ones by heat treatment. But in warm weather the germs are readily resurrected. Vegans are glad to be out of this nightmare of a food problem, which has arisen through the misuse of a food which nature never intended to make contact with air or light. It is inevitable that as the milk moves from cow to pail, from transport can to pasteurising plant, and finally to delivery bottle or milk jug, it becomes more and more polluted. But the danger does not end in this obvious risk of direct infection. The theory advanced by Dr. Goodfellow in his pamphlet Is Milk a Curse, enclosed as a supplement to this issue, points out that the growth of stimulating principle found in milk probably causes growth of the wrong sort in adults whose capacity for normal growth has ceased, leaving them with cancer. Cancer is often characterised by abnormal quantities of lactic acid, and races that drink only small quantities of milk have low cancer rates. 5 million of people in this country today are doomed to die of cancer. Milk consumption here at 1.2 billion gallons a year is still rising. America has 1 cow per family, and her milk tonnage exceeds that of the automobile industry output. The fact that we are not sufficiently quick-witted to trace the effects of milk drinking on this colossal scale is no reason to think it is a safe food. There seems more logic in the assumption that nature, which stops milk to the mammal very early in life, is possessed of an innate intelligence superior to that of the milk-mad dietitians. Further dangers. Because cow's milk is for a mammal who reaches maturity in 2 years, it is too rich in protein for human babies. It creates forced growth which nature never intends. For older children and adults it is constipating, catarrh forming, and not beyond suspicion where arthritic deposits appear. Its calcium does not prevent tooth decay, as statistics for all milk drinking countries show, and there is no vitamin or salt or other food substance in it that cannot be obtained more safely from plants. This stampede by the authorities to revert to baby food rather than recommend a sensible adult diet is a challenge to the sanity of the individual. If these words are read in the dim future when the science of dietetics has straightened itself out, let it be known that vegans today stand in their solitude to denounce this food which all others approve. The desired reform cannot, we think, long be delayed. Among nature cure students, perhaps cosmovitalists in this country can explain to us the curious deduction made by Professor Zeeksley on page 182 of his book, Medicine Tomorrow, where he writes, "There are those who say that we steal milk from animals and that this is an immoral act. This is the objection of certain humanitarian vegetarians. Unfortunately, these moralists feed on the ideas of printed books and not the ideas written in the book of nature. I very much doubt if some of them have ever seen a cow, or if they have ever studied them. If they had, they would know that when milking time comes for the cow and she is not milked, it is very disagreeable for her and she becomes seriously ill. When sometimes the time for milking comes and we do not milk cows, they become very restless and wait impatiently to be milked. So if we follow the advice of these moralist vegetarians, we cause terrible suffering to the cow, which is just the opposite to what they wish. A curious form of human benevolence. Where is the calf?" Cheese, eggs and honey. All these arguments against the use of milk apply, of course, to cheese, and here the moral objection is even stronger because rennet from a calf's stomach is used as a starter. Thousands of gallons of rennet are used in this country each year for cheese making. The poultry industry is operated by a system of exploitation no less severe than that in the dairy industry. The details necessarily differ, but we have the same ruthless extermination of stock as soon as it fails to show optimum efficiency. No poultry business would pay unless the surplus cocks were killed and the laying stock constantly replaced by young birds. The development of selective breeding of the reproductive function of the fowl has drained her stamina, so that now, like the cow, she is a degenerate creature. In his book, Science and Everyday Life, J.B.S. Haldane writes, "Great numbers of hens die of diseases of the egg-laying apparatus, and besides this, fowl paralysis and other diseases are spreading and playing havoc with our poultry industry." A distinguished poultry breeder told me he didn't think fowl paralysis had any further to spread in England. Eggs are not things that really count in human diet. Their slimy substance is not attractive and could not be negotiated without utensils. Study the habits of the domestic fowl to learn what eggs really are, reconstituted grubs and beetles. A short article explaining why vegans do not use honey is given in this issue. No more need be added here, except to mention that the refined products of Tate and Lyle do not appear to have assisted nature in keeping bees healthy. Old beekeepers tell us that disease in their stocks was rare 50 years ago. No one need wonder why it is increased. Progressive disease in animals. The progressive disease among domesticated animals caused by developing their reproductive functions and draining their energies to serve human needs has become one of the greatest problems of agriculture and therefore of civilization. F. Sykes may be a pessimist, but perhaps he is also a realist when he states in his recent book, "Will there be a second Black Death? Before the nation can have disease-free food, we must first of all endure the terrible agony of wide visitation of a plague or disease which will make the Black Death appear like a summer shower in comparison. Disease will become uncontrollable in cattle, ere long, and through meat and milk will transfer itself to men, women and children. We shall lose millions of livestock and millions of our population." We have recently received from the author a specimen copy of a work entitled The Animal Kingdom, A Reservoir of Disease by Julius Gilbert White of America. It comprises nearly 100 pages of detailed findings relating to this subject, and it is also a revelation that it seems possible that the degeneration has already gone too far to be checked. We are trying to purchase the book in quantity for distribution in this country. Economic advantages. Not only is veganism based on strong moral, aesthetic and hygienic precepts, but it also has far-reaching economic advantages. In a recent article, Food in War and Peace, by Professor F.A. Harper of Cornell University, the writer expressed the opinion that America would have no food to spare for export if she continued her present policy in agriculture and her present diet. He declared that the country raises 4 times as many calories as it eats, but instead of eating it or sending it abroad, 3/4 of it is fed to livestock, and in return the livestock gives back in meat, eggs and milk about 1/6 as many food calories as they consume, resulting in a loss of 4/5 to 5/6 of the calories raised. Summing up that point, he says, "That is the real form of food waste going on in the United States now." He further states that twice America's food calorie requirement are raised in the form of corn alone, most of which is fed to stock. The professor expresses doubt whether Americans will ever cease feeding to animals the food which should go to human beings, but he insists that this is the direction in which agriculturists and nutritionists should work in future. Might not the guarantee of abundant health-giving food to all men mark the turning point referred to in Mr. Oldham's query? Veganism and soil fertility. Under the system of such sweeping agricultural economy as veganism would allow, no one would need fear that animals would become extinct and that the soil would lose its fertility. At least half the acreage of our own densely populated country could be converted into parkland as the home for unexploited creatures living natural lives. Soil fertility would then be restored.